Hello, it's Rob Watson, and this is a Decentered Media vlog. And what I want to do today is just share some of my thoughts about the process of going to networking events. So, over the last few months, I'm working as a freelancer now, and I'm trying to piece together some contacts and a set of clients basically for research, consultancy, training, that kind of thing. So one of the things that you do I've been told that one of the things that you do when you first start out is you maybe attend some networking events and some forum meetings. And I wanted to share some of my experience of this because I've spoken about this in the past elsewhere about the way in which, as an introverted person, these kind of events maybe aren't quite so easy to get along with and to undertake, and they kind of take a lot out of me. So let's put it in context. A few years ago, a friend of mine asked me, are you an introvert or an extrovert? And I said, well, I'm an extrovert. I can stand up in front of an audience and I can deliver 200 people. I can deliver a lecture. And then they asked the question, okay, and said, what's your favourite time in the week? And I said, Friday evenings when I get home and close the door. And he said, right, you're an introvert. You've just learnt to deal with extrovert situations. So that was really the starting point of my journey of thinking about, kind of how my mental capacity, my cognitive capacity operates. And I started looking into some psychology based around Carl Jung's work, and I kind of loosely got kind of impressed with some of the Myers-Briggs type stuff. Not that I go into it in any kind of great depth or anything, but it's a good, useful framework for thinking about how different people process information, different people sense the world, and different people are aware of the relationships and what they're based on that we have between one another. So I've kind of used this a bit as a kind of reflection tool for myself. So going to these network events is quite interesting because I'm very uncomfortable in them, to be honest. And I think it's getting worse as I get older. So noise, like music, and lots of people stood around. Really, I mean, I've never been one for joining in the party. I'd always be in the kitchen having a very serious conversation, which apparently fits in quite well with my, the type. And I'm driven by kind of deeper rooted conversations based around values, based around ideas. And they can be quite extensive and quite tiring. But what I find intimidating and more tiring is the kind of small talk, is the kind of navigating your way around a room of people that you're trying to make contacts with and kind of say hello to lots of people. So I noticed that I'm more likely to be sat in a corner with my phone checking through messages than making eye contact with people and directly wandering up to people and saying hello, unless I know them already. So the last couple of events that I've been to, I went to an event at one of the universities in Leicester where there's a business accelerator. It was a really nice event. I got a lot of information out of it, some leads to follow up, that kind of thing. But the introduction and the presentation by one of the main speakers was very kind of, it was personality driven, let's put it that way. And I just recall sitting in my chair, closing my eyes to try and reduce the sensory overload of the kind of presentation. And it involved things like turning to your neighbour and chatting to them and participating in, kind of quick icebreakers, that kind of stuff. And honestly, the pain and the kind of, certainly in the morning before I've had coffee, is just, it takes a lot for me to kind of break out of that kind of, I'm not shy. It's one of the mistakes that people make about introversion. They associate it with shyness. It's a very different thing. It's just that my comfort, if you like, isn't with outward projection. It isn't with walking into a room of strangers and being everybody's friend. So the second event I went to, it required me to do some work at this event, and it needed me to do some listening participative listening processes, recording a podcast. But unfortunately, I kind of didn't get around the room to, kind of engage with people individually to come on and share their experience using the podcast. On a one-to-one level, it works very well. But in a group situation, I kind of can't switch modes. When I know I have to be in listening mode and focus mode, I can't really then become performer and the meter and greeter. So I kind of felt, it wasn't a good match. It wasn't a good use of everybody else's time and expertise and energy, and it wasn't. And I got overwhelmed by, what happens is there's a wave of people come in, enter the coffee area, if you like. Everybody's chatting away, and what I've noticed is that those are primarily extroverts. Loads of energy to begin with, lots of positive communication, lots of discussion, lots of face-to-face engagement, and then gradually as the day goes on, it gets lesser and lesser and lesser. And that's kind of when I'm starting to wake up. So I go the opposite way. So in the morning, I'm very quiet, I'm reserved, I sit and listen. But then in the afternoon, that's when I'm ready to have a good conversation, because I've absorbed and I've sorted a lot of the dynamics, if you like, between different people's personalities. But at that point, that's when extroverts go, oh, right, okay, I've had enough now. I've got to go on to go and do something else. The third one was having to do a presentation in front of a room full of people, again at one of the universities in Leicester, and the kind of fear. And if I wasn't there with my friends John Costa and Tina Barton, I wouldn't have done it. I'd have bottled out of it. And kind of this 3-minute pitch about why what I do is innovative. I kind of just had to go up and I can't recall what it is I said. It was like kind of adrenaline mode of trying to address people, and kind of try and be polite as well. Not don't balls it up, and answer the questions that came back from the panel, who were kind of passing comment and asking questions about it. And at the end, you're kind of thinking, what did I do that for? But I got a couple of people at the end who asked me about the work I do and the kind of approach that I take to media and community media. And it was nice to make one or two contacts that we've invited onto the podcast in a few weeks' time. So it's being tuned into those kind of ideas, and it kind of really got me thinking that maybe when we think about putting on an event and putting on a public event, we really should be thinking about cognitive diversity, and that a networking event and business networking events are primarily driven by the kind of showcasing, by the kind of the meet and greet, the networking, and actually maybe there's space and room to do something different. So some of my tips would be provide a side space for people who are not extroverted, who aren't extroverted, to sit quietly and do what they need to do to slowly introduce themselves to the room and the atmosphere and the people that are there. It doesn't help when large numbers of people are in a small space, and maybe keep the numbers down sometimes in who can attend. There's you might get a great response and get 60 or 70 people. Don't try and fit them all in. Run 2 sessions if you like, so that you're dealing with 30 people rather than 70, because then you've just got a bit more space. When you're cramped in together, it's like this kind of it's like a kind of sensory overload, which you've got to struggle through, because you don't want to absorb and take on everybody else's I'm not their friends. I'm not there to be their friends. But that's the kind of expectation that, that kind of cliche, if you like. Look around you, there's friends you haven't made yet. And it's like, I don't make friends like that. Not everybody does. Not everybody's comfortable with that. So provide some quiet spaces outside of that. And then kind of secondly is maybe think about starting the session in a different way. So rather than starting off with kind of energy and bounding on the stage and getting everybody, kind of whooping and cheering, or, everybody, energized, think about maybe doing some mindfulness exercises first, so that those people who are, they're driven by the need to impress other people in a short space of time and make contacts can actually drop that guard as well, and actually maybe it's the listening approach. So one of the things that kind of introverts are much better at doing is listening, but we don't enjoy having other people's personalities forced upon us. We will listen, and we'll listen for a long time, and we'll say our piece as well when we feel that it's being reciprocated. But if it's a one-way street, then that's when people kind of get frustrated, and I certainly know I get frustrated in those circumstances. So you become very guarded, and people think that you're aloof. So maybe, ramp it, kind of turn up the volume very slowly during the morning sessions. Maybe limit the coffee to begin with, because I have to drink a lot of caffeine to get into the mood to be in at one of these sessions. And that's not good, because there's a tipping point where I become over caffeinated, and that's not good for anybody. Next, third, don't do any introduction activities. Don't do these audience participation things. Everybody thinks they're great. All the literature that you see about icebreaking and running a successful event, no, they're not. But what you could do is give people post-it notes to write questions or to write things about themselves, and that you can pass that around the room and then maybe read some out. Because on the one hand, those people who are used to and are skilled with speaking out publicly, they will very naturally jump to the front. They will naturally try and grab the spotlight and be in front of everybody, just because either they've geared up for that or that's what they naturally do. However, those people who are holding back a little bit, and those people who are not so comfortable with that, also need to feel as if their points are being heard. So if there's a Q&A, for example, don't look for hands. Pass post-it notes around and ask people to write something down. Gather them in and then read them back. And there's people would appreciate that it's if you like more democratic, if you like, because you're giving people who aren't so forthright an opportunity to have their point made. And what you might find is that those people who are slightly less exuberant, if you like, and less performative, have something interesting to say as well. So it's, I'd really kind of, think carefully. My advice is, if you're doing a networking event, and I suppose if we're doing any kind of teaching and learning session, we have to think about the cognitive diversity of the people who are taking part. And maybe too often we stick to one pattern because it works well and it's suited to the culture that we're from. But when we try and interface with people who are developing, say, product development or services development, certainly if you're a startup, programming requires a high level of focus, and the people who are naturally drawn to that might be more introvert. So put them in a situation where they've got to perform and be confident and outward going. It's a mismatch. So thinking about ways that these things can be done without necessarily kind of putting people in the middle of something that they're really not comfortable with. So it's good to be able to, I find doing these vlogs is a good way to get this kind of thing off your chest. It's a good way of expressing some either frustration or sharing ideas. And I'd be really interested to speak with other people and find out more about what people who have similar experiences and would like to see events run in different ways, so that they are more open to cognitively diverse people, just to see what your experience is and what would be your ideal networking or kind of conference type situation where you're not driven, having to fuel yourself with loads of caffeine or run away and sit in the toilet because it's just overwhelming otherwise. Lots of people can be very overwhelming. Not that I've ever done that, by the way. I kind of usually sit in the corner quietly. But it's what is going to make people comfortable to participate, and how would that benefit the kind of majority of people who are all more extrovertly driven. So just some thoughts, some ideas. I don't know the answers. If you want to share your thoughts about this, just send us a tweet or contact us on Instagram via Decentered Media. And you can go to the website, which is decentered.co.uk. If you want to follow me on this channel, you can do. Just hit subscribe below, as all the other YouTube people seem to say, and use the thumbs up to see if you liked it. But I'll put another one of these together in a few days' time, and we'll see what kind of response we get from it.